Good morning. Today is Wednesday, October 22nd, and this update will be brief and have a limited focus because I really want everybody to tune in at 10 a.m. to the Executive Intelligence Review Seminar Roundtable on the Bering Strait Tunnel, which has now been put on the table in a very big way, preceding what will hopefully be a not too far distant summit in Budapest between Presidents Trump and President Putin, which the media and the Europeans are in a feeding frenzy to try and sabotage. But first, I wanted to take up this fraudulent No Kings rally, which occurred on Saturday all over the country. Apparently, they had demonstrations at 2,600 locations. There were supposedly 200,000 people in Washington, D.C. That's my organizer count, so who knows what it really was. Bernie Sanders spoke there, and I just wanted to share my thoughts about this, which I think are much closer to reality than what you'll be hearing in the mainstream press. First of all, this thing is a total fraud. But before I get to that, let me just share with you some excerpts from Bernie Sanders' speech, which he emailed to people all over the country, and apparently National Public Radio was rebroadcasting it all day on Sunday. They are clearly trying to deeply divide the nation without addressing any of the real issues which Americans care about. One of them being putting a stop to the genocide in Gaza, where there is now a fragile ceasefire and peace plan. Of course, none of these No Kings rallies have had anything to say about this. And the early ones were hands off NATO, wanting to continue arming Ukraine. So from Bernie Sanders' speech, he says, we are here because we're going to do everything we can to honor the sacrifices of millions of men and women who over the last 250 years fought and sometimes died to defend our democracy and our freedoms. Well, we have a democratic republic, and there's a reason for the consent of the governed, because the average American person doesn't expect to be up to par on every single minute issue or bill that comes before Congress. They elect people to represent them, and they hope that these people will hold their interests and the interests of the nation in mind. We see lately that many of them sell out very, very cheaply to various lobbies, including the Zionist lobby and others, but there are a few standing strong. Anyway, Sanders went on to say that today, in this dangerous moment in American history, our message is exactly the same. No, President Trump, we don't want you or any other king. Trump is not a king. He's the elected president of the United States. And then he says, it is a danger when we have a president who claims that peaceful protests in Portland, Oregon, or Chicago are an insurrection and calls in the military. I happen to agree with that. I don't think we should have the military in our cities. However, he says, and we have masked agents working for ICE, breaking down doors. I don't like that either. I think this is barbaric. Our ICE policy is unjust and barbaric. There's over 170 U.S. citizens who have been beaten, dragged, detained. And why do we treat human beings like animals? But I would never join Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. And then he says it is in danger when we have a president who sues and intimidates the media, when we have a president who tries to imprison his political opponents. Now, hold on right there on the media and political opponents. Have these people forgotten what they themselves, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and the other Democratic Party DNC hacks? I'm not going to call the whole Democratic Party. They had plenty of neocon supporters. Did to President Trump going into the 2020 election. Do you remember that you had an incumbent president running for re-election who was denied access to social media, to then it was called Twitter and Facebook, because they claimed he was spreading misinformation. So you have a sitting president up for election who can't even get on the media. Twitter banned the New York Post because of the Hunter Biden laptop story, where 51 lying retired military and intelligence professionals claimed that this had all the hallmarks of a Russian psyop, and in fact, the Hunter Biden laptop was real, but that was all scrubbed from the media. Is that not election interference? Is that not censorship? And imprisoning their political adversaries? Well, the biggest case of this is what the Democratic Party, the neocons, the Anti-Defamation League, the FBI, the IRS, the ADL did to Lyndon LaRouche when he was running for president, when in 1986, a judge, illegally, it was later determined, ruled that LaRouche's publications were involuntarily bankrupt, shutting them down, and then jailing LaRouche and a dozen of his associates on phony conspiracy charges. Are they protesting this at the No Kings rally? No, because they're the ones who did it. So this No Kings rally is a complete fraud and sham. It's designed to divide the nation. And if they were serious, they would try and find those areas where the Trump administration is right, like on wanting peace with Russia, wanting to end the bloodbath in the Middle East, and seek to build on that and augment that, as Helga Zepp LaRouche is doing. And believe me, I am not opposed to protesting things that are wrong, but they have no intention of doing anything right. This is just a strictly partisan ploy to rip the nation apart and to take advantage of people who have not taken the time and effort to get on top of things. Now, the number one matter is the Bering Strait tunnel, and I just wanted to share with you something really exciting. As you know, EIR is holding a roundtable later today at 10 o'clock this morning, which will feature Helga Zepp LaRouche, top Russian experts, American experts on this rail corridor. But you may not know the history of this. And partly it was inspired because Tsar Alexander II of Russia came to the aid of Abraham Lincoln and the Union Army during the so-called Civil War, better known as the War of Rebellion, fomented indeed by the British against the Union. And Tsar Alexander II actually sent the Russian Navy to New York and San Francisco when the British and the French were threatening to come in on the side of the Confederacy, which of course they were supporting because they wanted to keep the slave trade, cotton and tobacco. They never wanted our nation to become an industrial power. Does it sound familiar? So later, after the assassination of President Lincoln, under President Grant in 1869, there had been an ambassador chosen to go to Russia. His name was Andrew Curtin. He was the former governor of Pennsylvania. His whole family was involved in ironworks and iron production and iron building. And what was under discussion was the Transcontinental Railroad, which had just been completed, and indeed the Bering Strait. I think they thought at the time that this would better be a bridge. But I want to share with you a little bit of the speech of U.S. General Joshua T. Owen, who was speaking at a send-off dinner organized by Henry Carey, an American system economist who was Lincoln's advisor. And what he said to the newly appointed Ambassador Curtin to Russia, quote, "We have discovered that true glory is only to be attained through the performance of great deeds, which tend to advance civilization and develop the material wealth of people," unquote. And he continued that by participating in, quote, "girding the globe with a tramway of iron," unquote, that Russia would itself be unified and strengthened. And he said the Allies could, quote, "outflank the movement made by France and England for predominance in the East through the Suez Canal. And America and Russia can dictate peace to the world, unquote. A very beautiful idea. This would be the hope of the LaRouche movement, the LaRouche organization, and the Schiller Institute. And I think you will hear this expressed at the seminar roundtable today at 10 a.m. So I hope to see you there.